Remember when tariffs were marketed as the golden ticket to economic salvation? They were supposed to protect American jobs, revive domestic industry, and punish bad actors overseas. Just slap a tax on imports, they said, and factories would roar back to life. Jobs would multiply, wages would rise, the middle class would thrive. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Instead, what we got was sluggish market growth, disrupted supply chains, and a rise in job precarity. Businesses didn't invest or expand, they froze. Full time roles disappeared, replaced by temp contracts and gig work. Sound familiar? That's because this same sleight of hand shows up in the anti trafficking world through end demand initiatives. Both policies claim to protect the vulnerable. Both are framed as bold reforms, and both backfire, devastating the very people they claim to help. Tariffs, in theory, are about patriotism, leveling the playing field by making imports more expensive. But in practice, they just raise prices on materials, goods, and labor. That uncertainty makes businesses hesitate. No one hires, no one invests, workers lose out. Now, let's talk end demand. These policies aim to stop trafficking by criminalizing the buyers of sex rather than the workers. Sounds better than arresting sex workers until you look closer. Because what really happens is this: clients vanish, but not demand. Work goes underground. Sex workers, especially those already marginalized, are pushed into riskier conditions with fewer safety nets and less control. Tariffs and end demand both rely on restriction disguised as reform. They don't fix root causes, they mask them. They swap systemic investment for symbolic punishment. Their shared DNA, carceral logic dressed up as care. We've seen this pattern before. Drug policy promised safer communities. It delivered mass incarceration. Immigration crackdowns claimed to protect jobs. They militarized borders and split families. Again and again, we're told we're being protected. What we're actually being is policed. Here's the uncomfortable truth behind the promises. What we're told these policies will do rarely matches what they actually deliver. We're promised protection for workers, but what we get is layoffs, unstable gig work, and a growing reliance on temp contracts. We're told justice will be served for survivors, but instead, they're met with displacement, increased risk, and systemic erasure. We hear that bad actors will finally be held accountable, but in practice, it's often the survivors and marginalized communities who end up criminalized for simply trying to survive. And as for economic revival, what we actually see are higher costs, stagnation, and less financial security for those who can least afford the fallout. Tariffs didn't bring jobs back. End demand didn't end trafficking. Both just pushed people out of sight and off the books. Because you can't protect people by disappearing them. So what actually works? Instead of punishment, try investment. Fund small businesses and enforce labor protections. Support survivor and worker-led initiatives. Decriminalize survival economies. Create real pathways to safety without involving the police. Because safety doesn't come from surveillance. It comes from dignity, equity, and listening to the people most affected. Next time someone says, "We're doing this to protect you," ask them, who's being protected and who's paying the price for it?